Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we are doing a reboot of Sunset and Cattails. Now the reason I wanted to do a reboot of this video is because it was the very first video I ever posted, and I was still a little bit hesitant to put myself out there fully and share painting with you. It's something I wanted to do, but I wasn't fully comfortable with it yet. So I've been making these videos now for several months and I feel a little bit more confident, and since I've had a lot of questions on this video, can I do this? What about this? I decided to do it again so that I could walk you through the process with a little bit more instruction. Another reason I was a little hesitant to speak on camera when I made the first video was that my hair was electric blue and I didn't want to scare you guys away right off the bat, so I made sure that I didn't show up in the video. This is actually a very easy painting and it will help you work on brush control. We use the angle brush for the grasses here, and so that does take a certain amount of brush control. So you can practice that before you commit to this painting. And if you already have a little bit of experience with brush control with the angle brush, this will just help you refine it. Make sure you check out the description below for a full list of materials, and let's get started. For today's painting, we're going to use the following colors: Mars Black, Primary Blue, Primary Yellow, Deep Violet, and this is also a Liquitex Basics paint. I just bought it in a large tub, so I put it in this container so it's easier to use. And Titanium White. We're only going to use a teeny tiny bit of white. The brushes I'll be using are a 1-inch flat brush, a 5/8 inch angle brush, but if you don't have one of these, a 1/2 inch will work just fine, and a smaller angle brush. This one is about 1/4 inch. And I'm painting on a 12 by 16 inch stretched canvas. You can paint on any size and shape of canvas that you like though. To start off, we're going to paint our sky, and I want my sky to be fairly dark at the top here and really kind of randomly shaped throughout until where I get to where I want my horizon to be, which is going to be right about here. At that point, I'm going to reverse the colors that I'm using and just do them smoothly straight across. So what I mean is I'm going to start with black and blue, fading into blue and purple, fading into purple and yellow. And down here at my horizon line, I'm going to go from yellow into purple, into blue, into a hint of black. So I'm going to take my 1-inch flat brush, wet it in my jar, and wipe off the excess. And I'm going to start by loading up my brush with some blue. Lots of blue. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit of black on each corner. And I do it like that, grabbing it on the corner, just so I know exactly how much I have. You don't necessarily have to do it like that. You can grab it from the edge if you want. You can mix it off to the side. I don't like to mix it off to the side because I like my colors to blend on my canvas. So whichever you prefer. I'm going to do this with short back and forth brush strokes. See how my colors aren't blending together? That's why I do that, where I pick up the colors rather than mixing them on my plate, because I like the way that looks. Now I'm just going to pick up some blue, and notice I left my brush strokes in there. I like that because it makes the sky a little more dynamic, and to me it kind of is an easy way to insinuate that there's some clouds in the sky. So with just blue, I'm going to start right below here with the same brush stroke and slowly go up into it to blend them together. It doesn't have to be a perfect blend. And you can break up your line a little, so I have pieces that come down out of it. Now I'm just going to grab purple, and I still have a tiny bit of black and some blue on my brush. Again, starting just below the blue, up into it, and back down. And notice all my brush strokes are kind of having this upward look. And to me, that says there's a little bit of clouds and there's maybe some wind that's kind of streaking them upwards. Now I've washed off my brush, and I did that because I'm going to lay some solid purple here that doesn't have any blue in it. And the reason for that is because next I'm going to use yellow. Now the yellow and this purple will mix together, and it will look nice when they mix together. the yellow and the blue will mix together nicely. But if all three of them mix together, it gets really muddy and kind of gross looking. So I'm trying to avoid that. So I'm just gonna get a little bit of purple, just a little bit, and just make sure that this bottom edge is solidly purple without the blue in it. And I'm gonna break up that edge a bit again. Now in my original video, I had kind of this broken up part coming down out of the middle, and most of the paintings that I've seen of people recreating it, they put that break right there in the middle. And I don't intend for you to do this exactly like I'm doing. Just break it up a little bit at the bottom, make it look however you want it to look. Now I'm gonna grab some yellow, and I do have some purple still on my brush. I'm gonna go right up into that purple because I love the way they mix. I think it makes the perfect sunset color. You do have to be careful with what purple and yellow you mix together. For example, if you use Diox purple in place of this purple, it will not mix nicely with the yellow. Now I've cleaned off my brush so I can get pure yellow. I'm gonna do the same thing, just blending it up into there. Just focusing really on the bottom of this line. And now I'm gonna start working in a horizontal brush stroke. Because this is where my water is gonna be. Now it doesn't matter how well you get this blended here because you're really just gonna use it as a guide. We're gonna paint over almost all of this. Now I'm gonna get a little purple. I still have yellow on my brush. I'm gonna start below the yellow, blend up slowly into it, and back down. I'm gonna clean off my brush again. Now I'm just grabbing blue, starting just below my purple and working up into it. And just a hint of black, a little more blue, just for this bottom piece here. Now let's draw our horizon. And I'm gonna put my horizon right in the center of this yellow block. And I want it to be arced up a little on the edges, a little lower in the middle, and up more on the other edge. You can make this a smooth arc like that, or you can draw some mountains. You don't even have to do it exactly like mine. You could have maybe a hill on one side that just moves down to the other side, or even just a mountain range that's just tall all the way across, whatever you prefer. So I have my 5/8 inch angle brush, and there's a little extra water in it so it mixes nicely with the black paint. So I'm gonna load up with a little bit of black paint. And remember, the tip of the brush always drags. So if I'm gonna start on this side and go this way, my brush is gonna be angled that way so that as I go across, that tip drags. If I hold my brush this way and try and draw my line, I'm gonna lose control of my line because it's gonna crush the tip of that brush in like that, rather than dragging nicely like that. So I'm just gonna decide where I want the top of my hill, and I can make adjustments as I go, so it doesn't have to be perfect right off the bat. Okay, come down like that. And back up over there. And super light pressure gets you the nice thin line. Remember, if you're not comfortable doing that, just practice. Practice over and over and over until you are comfortable with it. A little more black paint, and now I'm gonna draw where the banks of my water are. You can really shape it however you want. Maybe it's farther in up here and it gets wider here and comes back around here. Just do it however you want to. So I think I'm gonna start back here and just kind of scribbling a line. I'm gonna bring it in a little farther there. Does not have to be exactly like mine. I think that looks good. I'm gonna do something similar on the other side. and then just fill these two sections in with solid black paint. If it's still wet, mine's still a little damp, then you might want to let it dry first, and I think I'm going to do that. All right, that's dry enough now. Now the reason I wanted it to be dry is because, I don't know if you can tell in here, but a little bit where the paint, the purple was wet, the black kind of pulled it and then made the black transparent. So I just want to make sure I get a nice smooth coverage. So that's why I let it dry. So I'm just going to fill this in solid. Brush directionality doesn't matter. And if you don't like the shape of your hills, you can change it here. It's okay if you go outside of the line that you drew originally. Now we're going to draw just a little piece of foreground here because I want some grasses coming up in front of everything as well. So kind of the same thing I did here, just very low. Now I've seen some people leave this part out altogether, and that's fabulous. If you don't want to put that in there, or you forget about it, or you feel like you don't have room for it, that's okay, don't worry about it. Now we're going to let this black dry completely because we're going to start adding our detail into our water. And if this black is wet at all, you may drag some black into the water. So just wait until that black is completely dry and then come back. Now we're going to paint our ripples in our water. And I didn't tell you in the opening that I was going to use a little round brush for this part, but I decided to. And the reason I decided to is because I feel like the angle brush is harder for some of you to use if you're not fully familiar with it. And then you end up just getting a straight line and you get frustrated with that. So we're going to use this little brush instead so that we can get some nice movement in our water here. This brush says that it's a number 6. Any brush that you have will work. It's just under 1/4 of an inch wide, I think. So I've wet this brush in my jar, and I'm gonna we're gonna start in the back here. I want my ripples to kind of match what's going on under here, but it's not gonna be exact. So this is really just a guide for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be happy with the fact that I have such a sharp line here and such a sharp line here. If I wanted any of this to show, I would have put more attention into blending those colors together. So I'm going to take this brush, and I did grab a little bit of white. And the reason I'm going to use white here with the yellow is because the white's going to make the yellow less transparent. So I'm going to load up with a little bit of white. I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow, bring it over, and make a nice bright yellow. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of dash across this. And each brush stroke is overlapping the previous one. So let me show you what I'm doing on my plate here. I'm going about like that. And see how everyone is overlapping a previous one? It's not necessarily covering all of this. Some of this color in here is going to peek through, but that's okay, that's what we want. As we start in the back, our dashes are smaller, meaning I'm not putting as much pressure, just about like that. Just the tip of the brush. As we move down to this area that's closer to us, I will put more pressure on my brush. So it's the difference between, let me get some more paint. It's the difference between about like this right now, little tiny dashes that all overlap, to at the bottom in the blue, I'm gonna be putting pretty much full pressure on my brush. See the difference between those few dashes? So it's just gonna slowly get wider as you work your way down. All right, so a little white and a little yellow. And my little dashes don't worry about where your water edge is. Go all the way to it. If you happen to go over it a little bit, that's fine, don't sweat it. It's better if you go over the edge of your riverbank a little bit than try and stop right up to it and you end up seeing this uneven blend all the way to the edge. Your little ripples would be going all the way to the edge of the riverbank. So just let that happen. You can touch that up with some black paint afterwards. Now I'm gonna get just some solid yellow because it's a little brighter than the yellow with the white. And just add a few in here. Really, you can't see what's going on in here right now because it's just yellow, but as we start getting down into here, you'll be able to see. So just hang with me for a minute. A little more yellow white. And I'm gonna start breaking it up a little. They're not all overlapping quite as much anymore because I'm gonna transition. I'm gonna start transitioning. So I grabbed a tiny hint of my purple. And I think that's a little too much, so we'll mix over here. There we go. I just want a slightly pinker color than the yellow. And just get some of that up in here. This is a really slow transition, guys, so don't go through here putting just yellow and then all of a sudden go into purple, because then your ripples will look exactly like this. It's a little bit more. And if you feel like you have too much of a line, I just picked up yellow and I can put it right over top of that. So just keep working at it until it looks like what you want it to look like. If at any point you just absolutely hate it, then stop what you're doing. Let it dry, paint over it, and come back. But see, now I know that I should be transitioning a bit here because that's where that line is. So I'm gonna work on breaking that line up. I'm taking some of this purpley yellow up a little bit higher. Can you start to see a little bit of the ripples? Now I just got yellow, and I'm gonna take a bit of that down into here because I want a really rippled effect. And if this water is moving and ripply, then it's gonna break up all of the sky in the reflection, and you might have little bits of the yellow sky reflecting in the purple part. So I'm okay with taking some of that yellow down into here. See, all the way to the riverbank. Don't stop at it like this. Because see, you can see that color still. Just go up to it, over the edge of the black if you have to. Now I'm putting a little more pressure on my brush and getting some wider and longer lines, because this part's closer. I'm going to keep throwing just a hint of that yellow in here. And then right in here is where I'm gonna start transitioning into my blue a bit. So I'm gonna let that purple go down into the blue. And that is spotty, they're not all overlapped, but that's because I'm gonna come back in with the blue-purple mixture and fill in some of those areas. So ultimately, all of my brush strokes are overlapping each other. And that blue is a little strong, so I'm gonna come back over it with some purple and tap it down a bit. Just make sure I've got some purple down in here before I start adding my blue. And notice I'm not cleaning off my brush in between. I'm always just picking up the next color. I'm using a little bit of a mixture of whatever colors I'm transitioning from and to. Oh, one other thing, notice my brush strokes are always horizontal. So I'm not doing any of this because that's not what a ripple in the water would look like. Oh, and one other thing, notice that I'm not putting the yellow in this area. You can if you want to, I suppose, but I would wait until after the blue and the purple are dry, because just like with the sky where we didn't want to use the brush with all three colors on it because we would get a muddy mess, you'll get a muddy mess in here too if you use the blue with the purple and the yellow. I'm going to clean off my brush because I still feel like I have too hard of a transition here. There's more of a line than I want. But since there's some yellow in here and some blue in here, I don't want to mix them, so I'm going to clean this off. All right, so a little bit of purple, just purple, nothing else. Because right in here I've got a lot of the purple-yellow mixture, but not a lot of solid purple. So I'm going to take the solid purple up in here a bit. I'm being careful not to cover any of my yellow spots because I like those. But if I bring a little solid purple into here, it will ease the transition into this area a bit more. Same here, just bringing a bit of the purple down into the blue. And just keep adding until you're happy with it. If you're just completely not happy with it, paint over it and start over. But don't get frustrated. Frustration is the #1 killer of creativity. See how here I'm barely putting any pressure on my brush. I'm just using it really kind of like this. And it's just to add some tiny little specks of the color where I want it to be. feel like that's better. Now we're gonna make some little grasses on the top of these hills. In the original video, I took the little tiny grasses all the way across here, and I decided that I didn't really like that. So I'm not gonna do that here, but if you wanna do that, you're more than welcome to. While you're using the black to make your little grasses, you can touch up the spots where maybe your water went over your riverbank a little bit. So I've got my small angle brush, and it's got a little extra water in it that I'm just gonna mix with some black paint. Remember, you mix a little extra water in with black paint because it helps it spread smoother so that you get a nice solid line. So I'm always going to be starting my grasses from the bottom up, so my angle brush is going to be pointing down the whole time. And I'm going to brace my hand on my canvas somehow, and that's going to help me maintain my pressure rather than just doing it like this. However you want to put your hand on your canvas, but I recommend that somehow you're bracing your hand on your canvas. So I'm just gonna start with little tiny, just little lines. Notice it's just the tip of my fingers that are moving. It's not my whole hand or my whole arm, just the tip of my fingers. Some are longer, some are shorter, some are fatter. They all kind of move in different directions. Let me show you on the back of my plate exactly what I'm doing here. Kind of sideways so you can see. I'm only using just the long tip of the brush. I'm not using the brush flat like that because it takes more control, or it takes more attention. You get a wider line and it's harder to control and you get kind of fuzzy things. So it's just the tip of my brush like that. Just the end of it. Just keep a little extra water there and put your grasses up here however you want them. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. My camera was kind of getting in my way, and so I got some fat grasses, but that's okay. Because when I'm doing my long grasses in the foreground later, I can just make sure to put them over top of this part if I decide I don't like it. And I think this brush is getting a little bit fuzzy and kind of losing its shape. Yeah, my brush is getting fuzzy. That's okay. I actually kind of don't mind the way that it's fattening out some of those grasses at the end. Makes them look a little bit more wild and stick-like. Just some teeny, super short ones there to make it look like they trail off into the distance. Now we're gonna do essentially the exact same thing as we did with these little grasses, but we're gonna come from these corners and do some longer ones. So I'm gonna use my 5/8 inch angle brush. I'm gonna wet it in the jar and just let the drips fall off. I'm not gonna wipe off because I want that extra water. And I'm gonna bring that extra water over to my black and mix it in. I don't want it to be runny, just a little bit wetter than how the paint comes out of the tube. If it's too wet, you'll know because it will be transparent when you put it on. And if you're using craft paint, you may not need to mix extra water in with it at all because some of those paints tend to be kind of thin anyway. Okay, again with my angle brush pointing down, I'm gonna decide which corner I want my main big grasses coming from, and I think I wanna do it on this corner. So my brush is pointing down. I'm gonna start down here with my pressure about the same as when we were doing the little brushes. I'm really only using the tip of the brush. And I'm just gonna start making some larger grasses. Kind of make sure they all go different directions. You can push a little harder at the bottom if you want a grass that's a little bit fatter. right here, I don't know if you can tell, but that grass isn't solid. You can see the sky through it. So that tells me that my paint is getting a little bit too dry. If you widen some of these grasses a little bit, that's really interesting. Sometimes, you know, grasses that grow by a river are really flat and thin, so when they turn in the wind, you might see it going from skinny to fat to skinny again. So don't be too totally concerned if your grasses aren't really thin. In fact, I think I'm going to add some little bit fatter ones in here. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to add quite a bit of black so that it's not so transparent there. Looks like a nice thick clump of grass. And I'm going to add a few at the bottom here. And maybe some on the other side. But I don't want these ones to be quite as tall or as filled in, because this is my main side. Now let's add some cattails. Now you don't have to place the cattails on the end of a grass that's existing. Just decide where you want them, paint them there, and if you need a grass coming off of it, you can add one. I'm gonna do 3 cattails because I think that odd numbers in points of interest are a little bit more interesting than, you know, doing 2 or 4. So I think I'll start right here, and my angle brush is pointing downward. And I'm gonna push a little fatter and kind of draw a leaf shape like that. And I'm going to do another one on this side going the opposite direction. And fill it in. And maybe I'll do one right about here. And then I think I'll do one over here. Maybe it's pointing just a slightly different direction than these two. Now they need some grasses coming off of them. Now my angle brush is pointing up since I'm starting here and going down. I think I'm even going to put one in one of these faraway grasses here with my teeny brush. And just kind of insinuate them. Now let's let our main cattails dry and we'll come back, add some highlights to them, and we're done. All right, last part, we're gonna put some highlights on these larger cattails. Now I'm gonna put my highlights on this bottom edge here because since the sun has set and it's low, that's where the light is coming from. And I'm gonna use a mixture fairly similar to this color here, and that's just because that's the color that I like. You can highlight it with any one of the colors that you used in your sky. So I have my 5/8 inch angle brush, and I'm gonna mix up a purple yellow color, similar to what's in the sky there. I'm gonna grab a little bit of white. So I'm gonna take my brush along this bottom edge and just kind of swoop up over it a little bit. And this one I'm mostly only going to highlight on the bottom. I think I'm going to touch this one up a little bit. And this one's closer to the light, so it might be a little bit brighter than the other ones anyway. If you really hate the highlights that you do on these, then just let it dry, paint over it with black, and do it again. Super simple. You can certainly use the smaller angle brush here if the big angle brush was hard for you to get in there. Just use the smaller one. So there's our Sunset and Cattails reboot. I hope you guys had a great time painting this with me, and as always, feel free to share your finished product on my Facebook page. There's a link in the description below. You can get super creative with this painting. You can really use any colors that you like for this. You could make it a daytime scene or just anything you want. My only advice if you're going to use different colors is to first test them and see what they all do together. Like I said before, if we were to use Diox purple here instead of deep violet, it doesn't mix well with this color of yellow, so we would just get mud. So just know those things before you go into it with other colors. If Diox purple is the only purple you have, you can use yellow oxide here in place of the primary yellow. Yellow oxide and Diox purple mix really beautifully together. Those are the same colors that I used in the Midnight Raven video. I will also be doing a reboot of the Midnight Raven video here in the next few weeks, so stay on the lookout for that. So thank you for watching, everyone. I want you to all keep painting and enjoy the process, and I'll see you next time.